I'm Alice, 28, female, and my family deliberately excluded me from our annual vacation, but still charged my credit card over $20,000 for the entire trip. The email notification arrived on a Tuesday morning, a sterile, automated message from my credit card company that felt like a digital slap in the face. Thank you for your payment of $21,450.78 to Royal Atlantic Cruise Lines. I stared at the screen, my half-eaten yogurt and granola forgotten on the desk. My heart didn't race. It did the opposite, slowing to a heavy, cold thud in my chest. It wasn't a mistake. I knew, with a certainty that was as painful as it was absolute, that this was intentional. This was the culmination of years of learned behavior, my family, and my own. My name is Alice. I'm a software engineer, a job I love that has, fortunately, provided me with a level of financial stability my family had never known. Growing up, money was always a source of stress. My parents were hardworking people, but there was never quite enough to go around. I remember the hushed, tense arguments over bills at the kitchen table, the quiet disappointment when a school trip was deemed too expensive. That anxiety became a part of my DNA. So when I started earning a good salary, my first instinct was to share, to alleviate that pressure for the people I loved. I wanted to be the solution, not another problem. And for a while, it felt wonderful. I was no longer the quiet, nerdy kid. I was Alice, the generous niece, the reliable sister, the one who could make things happen. The problem is that a solution, when used too often, becomes an expectation. My Aunt Brenda and Uncle Gary were the first to truly master this equation. Aunt Brenda, my mother's sister, had a knack for framing every request as an emergency that only I could solve. It started small, a phone call here and there. "Oh, Alice, honey, the water heater broke. Gary is so stressed and we just don't have it right now. Could you possibly help us out? We'll pay you back on the 1st. I'd send the money, and the 1st of the month would come and go with no mention of repayment. If I ever gently brought it up, Aunt Brenda would sigh dramatically. "Oh, you know how it is. Something else came up. The kids needed new shoes. You don't have kids yet, you wouldn't understand." I was 23 at the time. I didn't understand, but I understood the guilt she was expertly weaving. A year later, their car died. It was an old sedan and it was bound to happen, but the way they described it, you would have thought a national tragedy had occurred. Uncle Gary called me this time, his voice low and somber. "Alice, we're in a real bind. Brenda can't get to work. The kids can't get to their appointments. I don't know what we're going to do." He never explicitly asked for money. He was smarter than that. He just painted a picture of despair and left me to fill in the solution. I ended up giving them a significant amount for a down payment on a new minivan. They sent me a photo of the family standing in front of it, all of them beaming. The caption on the photo they posted online read, "So blessed to have our new family ride. Hard work pays off." There was no mention of me. When I saw them next, Aunt Brenda hugged me and whispered, "You're a lifesaver. This car is really going to change things for us." It did. It made it easier for them to visit and to ask for more. The annual family cruise was my biggest contribution. It had started 5 years ago as a modest trip, a way for the whole extended family to get together. The first year, everyone chipped in. The second year, a few cousins fell on hard times. Aunt Brenda organized a family call. "It's just not fair that some of us can't go," she'd announced. "We're family, we should stick together." Her eyes, I remember, had flickered towards me through the screen. I felt the familiar weight of expectations settle on my shoulders, so I offered to cover the difference for my cousins. The next year, I was asked to cover the deposit for everyone to secure the good rooms. By the 4th year, the bill was just forwarded to me directly from the travel agent Brenda used. It became my thing. Alice's cruise, they called it sometimes, though usually only when they were thanking me. The rest of the time, it was just the family cruise. I was the silent, invisible benefactor. I told myself it was worth it. Seeing the photos, hearing the stories, feeling like I was the anchor that kept our family connected, it was a powerful feeling. It patched over the hollowness I felt from my own lack of a bustling social life. My work was demanding, and long hours made it hard to build deep friendships outside of the office. My family, in a way, was my social life. They were my everything, and I was paying a premium for that sense of belonging. The cost, I was beginning to realize, was not just financial. It was my self-respect. This year, the planning had started without me. I saw hints of it in tea. He family group chat, photos of cruise ships, discussions about excursions, but my name was never mentioned. When I asked, "Hey, are we thinking about the cruise for this year?" the chat would go silent for hours. Then someone would change the subject. It was a strange, isolating feeling, like being a ghost at a party. My younger cousin, Chloe, who was 19 and the only one who seemed to operate without a hidden agenda, called me one night. "Hey, Alice," she said, her voice hesitant. "Are you coming on the cruise? Aunt Brenda is finalizing the rooms." "I haven't been invited, Chloe," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "I don't even know the dates." She was quiet for a moment. "Oh, that's weird. She told everyone you were probably too swamped with that big project at work. She said she didn't want to bother you." "She didn't bother to ask me either," I replied, the bitterness creeping in. The call ended with a vague promise from Chloe to find out what's going on. But I knew what was going on. They were cutting me out. The part that I couldn't yet comprehend was why. Had I offended someone? Had my quiet presence become a burden? The silence from the rest of the family was deafening. It was a void that I filled with my own insecurities. Maybe they were tired of me. Maybe my generosity felt like a judgment on their own lives. Or maybe, just maybe, they had finally bled me dry and were moving on. That theory was obliterated, of course, by the charge. But before that came the text message from Aunt Brenda. It came a week after my call with Chloe, a single, clinical message that was the final piece of the puzzle. It read, "Heard you were asking about the cruise. We went ahead and booked it. Just figured you'd be too busy with work anyway. Hope it goes well. We'll send pictures." There it was. Not an apology, not an explanation, just a breezy, dismissive confirmation of my exclusion. It was so condescending, so utterly devoid of any real feeling for me. I was not a person to be missed, just an obstacle that had been conveniently rationalized away. I didn't reply. What could I say? "Thanks for letting me know," or "Wow, that hurts"? Any response would be feeding into her drama, so I stayed silent. I let the text sit there, a monument to their casual cruelty. For 2 days, I wrestled with the hurt. I told myself to be the bigger person, to rise above it. They didn't want me there? Fine, I'd have a quiet week at home. I'd save the money. I'd be mature about it. And then, on that Tuesday morning, the email arrived. The 21,450.78 charge. The final, brutal truth. They hadn't just cut me out. They had cut me out and then handed me the bill for their party. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had used me. My card, which Brenda had insisted on keeping on file with her travel agent for convenience, had become their personal slush fund. The hurt from the text message instantly curdled into something else. It was a cold, hard anger. The kind of anger that clarifies things, that burns away the fog of sentimentality and guilt. I wasn't just a benefactor anymore. I wasn't an anchor. I was a doormat, and I was finally ready to get up off the floor. The weeks leading up to Aunt Brenda's text message were a masterclass in passive aggression. The family group chat, once a lively stream of memes, baby pictures, and weekend plans, became a carefully curated performance. I'd see a flurry of notifications, and by the time I opened the app, it would be a benign conversation about the weather. But I knew I was missing something. It was like walking into a room where people stopped talking. The silence itself was a language, and it spoke volumes. My first concrete clue, besides the general weirdness, came from a slip-up by my uncle. He posted a photo on social media, a picture of a brochure for the Royal Atlantic Cruise Lines, with the caption, "Here we go again, can't wait for some sun." It was up for less than 10 minutes before it was deleted, but I had already seen it. I took a screenshot, more out of instinct than anything else. It felt like evidence, though I wasn't sure what I would be prosecuting. I decided to test the waters. In the group chat, I posted a cheerful message. "Hey everyone, saw a post about a cruise, looks amazing. Are we starting to plan the annual trip?" The response was immediate and overwhelming silence. Nothing. For 3 solid hours, not a single reply. My message just hung there, unanswered. My cheeks burned with a strange mix of embarrassment and indignation. I felt like a child who had asked a question that was too grown up, and all the adults had tacitly agreed to ignore me. Finally, my other aunt, my dad's sister, replied with a picture of her new puppy. The subject was officially changed. The message was clear: this conversation is not for you. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were planning a surprise for me. It seemed unlikely. My family wasn't known for its subtlety. And a surprise trip wasn't their style. More likely, they were planning something smaller, something they could afford on their own, and were too embarrassed to tell me after years of me footing the bill. This thought actually brought a small measure of relief. Maybe they were finally becoming self-sufficient. Maybe this was a good thing, a sign of them taking responsibility. It was a comforting lie, and I clung to it. My call with Chloe shattered that illusion. She was a sweet kid, studying art in college, and she still had that youthful inability to hide her feelings. When she called, her voice was laced with a guilt that wasn't hers to bear. "Alice, I feel so weird about this," she started, after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "Everyone is so excited about the Bahamas, but it just feels wrong that you're not coming." The Bahamas, so they had a destination. The lie I'd told myself about a smaller, more affordable trip crumbled. The Bahamas wasn't cheap. "Chloe, it's okay," I lied, trying to soothe her. "I am really busy with work. It's probably for the best." "But that's the thing," she blurted out. Aunt Brenda told everyone that was the reason, but she said it in this really weird way. She was like, "Poor Alice is just chained to her desk. We should let her have her peace and quiet." But she never even asked you. And Uncle Gary was laughing, and he said, "Yeah, her peace and quiet will pay for our fun in the sun." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Her peace and quiet will pay for our fun in the sun. So it wasn't just an exclusion. It was a joke. I was the punchline. My hard work, the very thing they were using as an excuse to discard me, was also the thing they were counting on to fund their vacation. The sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of it left me speechless. "He said that," I finally managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "Yeah," Chloe said, her own voice small. "I think he thought it was funny. Nobody else laughed, but nobody said anything either. They all just kind of looked at their shoes." And that was perhaps the most painful part, the silence of the others. My mother, my father, my other aunts and uncles. They had all stood by and let it happen. They were complicit in their silence, content to enjoy the fruits of my labor as long as they didn't have to acknowledge the rotten roots from which it grew. They were all getting a free vacation, after all. What was my hurt feelings compared to 7 days of sun, surf, and free buffets? After I got off the phone with Chloe, I sat in my quiet apartment, the city lights twinkling outside my window. For the first time, I felt utterly, completely alone. The family I had invested so much in, the family I had prioritized over my own social life, had revealed themselves to be a group of strangers united only by their shared interest in my bank account. The sense of belonging I had paid for was an illusion. I had been renting their affection, and the lease was apparently up. For a week, I was adrift in a sea of hurt. I went to work, I wrote code, I attended meetings, but I was just going through the motions. My mind was elsewhere, replaying conversations, re-examining years of interactions through this new, harsh lens. Every thank you, every hug, every "you're a lifesaver" now seemed tainted, transactional. Had any of it been real? Then came the text from Aunt Brenda. I was in the middle of a complex debugging session when my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, expecting a notification from work. Instead, I saw her name. "Heard you were asking about the cruise. We went ahead and booked it. Just figured you'd be too busy with work anyway. Hope it goes well. We'll send pictures." I read it once, then twice. The casual cruelty of it was stunning. The cheerful exclamation point at the end of pictures felt like a tiny, sharpened dagger. It was a message designed to communicate one thing: we did this without you, we don't feel bad about it, and we are rubbing it in your face. The lie about me being busy was no longer a flimsy excuse. It was a weapon, wielded to make me feel small and irrelevant. This was the moment the sadness began to curdle. Hurt is a passive emotion, it happens to you. But anger is active. Anger requires a response. I didn't know what that response would be yet, but as I stared at her message, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, a spark of fight. I had let them define my role in the family for too long. The role of the provider, the problem solver, the ever-flowing fountain of cash. They had written me into their story as a background character, a walking, talking ATM. I turned my phone over, screen down, on my desk. I took a deep breath and turned my attention back to the lines of code on my monitor. I would not give her the satisfaction of a reply. I would not beg for an explanation or lash out in anger. I would give her the same thing her family had given me: silence. For 2 days, I held thaw. Silence. It was a heavy, difficult thing to carry, but with every passing hour, it felt less like a weakness and more like a shield. I was conserving my energy. I had a feeling I was going to need it. The 2 days after Aunt Brenda's text were a strange limbo. A part of me, the part that had been conditioned for years to seek their approval, was still hoping for a follow-up. A text from my mom asking if I was okay. A call from an uncle saying it was all a misunderstanding, but my phone remained silent. The family had closed ranks, and I was on the outside. I tried to embrace it. I made a list of all the things I could do with a week off. I could deep clean my apartment, tackle the stack of books on my nightstand, maybe even take a solo road trip. I would be fine. I would be mature. I would not let their petty drama affect my peace. I repeated this to myself like a mantra. I am fine. This is fine. It was a fragile peace, easily shattered. Every buzz of my phone sent a jolt of anxiety through me. Every time I saw a family photo on social media from a past gathering, a fresh wave of hurt washed over me. I was grieving a relationship I was only now realizing had been one-sided all along. On the morning of the second day, I woke up feeling a little lighter. I had survived the initial shock. The sun was streaming through my window. I decided I would go for a long run, clear my head, and officially begin my week of self-care. I was just tying my running shoes when my laptop, which was open on my coffee table, chimed with a new email notification. It was from my credit card company. I almost ignored it, assuming it was a promotional offer. But the subject line caught my eye: large purchase alert. My stomach clenched. I walked over to the laptop and clicked open the email. There it was, in bold, black font that seemed to scream at me from the screen. Merchant, Royal Atlantic Cruise Lines. Amount, $21,450.78. Date, yesterday's date. I sank onto the couch, my running plans forgotten. I read the numbers again and again, trying to make them mean something else. $21,450.78. It was an astronomical sum. It was more than the down payment I had given Brenda and Gary for their car. It was more than my own yearly rent. It wasn't just the amount that stunned me into silence. It was the audacity, the sheer, unmitigated gall of it. To exclude me from a family tradition was one thing, to lie about the reason was another. But to do both, and then secretly charge the entire vacation to my name, this wasn't a slight. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft. My mind raced back to 2 years prior. Brenda had been having trouble booking the cruise online. "The website is so confusing, Alice," she had complained. "And they need a credit card to hold the booking for the whole group. Can I just use yours to make it easier? The family will pay you back their shares." Like a fool, I had agreed. I read her my card number over the phone. The shares from the family had trickled in over the next few months, but several, including Brenda and Gary's, never materialized. When I had asked about it, she'd said, "Oh, we figured you wouldn't mind covering us since you're so good with money." I had let it slide, and in doing so, I had left a loaded weapon in the hands of someone who had no qualms about using it against me. Her travel agent had saved my card information. "For convenience next year," Brenda had said. The convenience, it turned out, was all hers. The cold anger I had felt after her text message now returned, magnified 100 times. It was a clean, purifying fire, burning away the last vestiges of my sentimentality. There was no more room for doubt, no more benefit of the doubt to give. This was not a family that had made a mistake. This was a group of people who had made a calculated decision. They had weighed my feelings against a free luxury vacation, and my feelings had lost. They saw me as a resource, a utility, and my purpose was to provide. Now that they had decided they no longer required my presence, they had simply switched me to a non-attending benefactor. I thought about their plan. They would all get on the ship. They would sail to the Bahamas. They would eat and drink and laugh, all on my dime, while I was at home nursing my hurt feelings. They would send pictures, as Brenda had so generously offered, of their happy, sun-drenched faces. And when the credit card bill arrived a month later, what did they expect me to do? Quietly pay it to avoid a confrontation, to preserve a family relationship that was already a sham. Yes, that's exactly what they expected. They were counting on my conflict avoidance. They were counting on my desire for peace. They were counting on my weakness. For years, I had paid to keep the peace. I had subsidized their lives to maintain an illusion of a happy, close-knit family. They had pushed and pushed, tack-ing more and more, and I had never pushed back. They had no reason to believe this time would be any different. But they had miscalculated. They had pushed me one step too far. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my generosity for foolishness. And in doing so, they had given me an incredible gift: clarity. I stood up from the couch and walked to my desk. I sat down, took a deep breath, and looked at the name on the email notification again. Royal Atlantic Cruise Lines. I picked up my phone, but I didn't text Brenda. I didn't call my mother. I didn't post anything passive-aggressive on social media. I opened my web browser and typed in the name of the cruise line. It was time to make a phone call. The anger had burned away the hurt and left behind a core of solid steel. My role in this family was about to change. The ATM was officially closed. My hand was perfectly steady as I dialed the number for the cruise line's customer service department. The rage that had been a roaring fire in my chest had now cooled into something focused and efficient. There was no room for emotion. This was a transaction, a problem to be solved. A pleasant, pre-recorded voice greeted me, followed by a series of menu options. For new bookings, press 1. For existing reservations, press 2. I pressed 2. The hold music was a cheerful, tinny version of a Caribbean folk song, a starkly ironic soundtrack for what I was about to do. I imagined my family at this very moment, probably packing their bags, triple-checking their flight times to the port city. I pictured Aunt Brenda reminding everyone to bring sunscreen, and Uncle Gary boasting about the deep-sea fishing excursion he was planning. The image didn't even hurt anymore. It just fueled my resolve. After a few minutes, a live person answered. "Thank you for calling Royal Atlantic. This is Marco. How can I help you today?" "Hello, Marco," I said, my voice even and calm. "I'm calling about a charge that was made to my credit card yesterday. I believe it was for a large group booking." "Certainly," he said politely. "Do you have the reservation number?" "I don't," I replied. "I wasn't given one. The reservation would have been made by a woman named Brenda Miller, but the payment was charged to my card. My name is Alice Reed." I could hear the soft clicking of his keyboard. "Okay, I see a booking here for the Miller party, a group of 15 people. Is that correct?" 15, I asked, a fresh jolt of astonishment hitting me. They hadn't just invited the core family, they had invited distant cousins, friends of their kids. They were really throwing a party. "Yes, that sounds about right." And it was booked for the 7-day Bahama Bliss cruise, departing this Friday. "That's the one," I confirmed. "Okay, Ms. Reed, I see the payment here. How can I help you with it?" he asked. I took a breath. This was it. "I need to cancel the booking," I said, the words coming out with a quiet finality. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You want to cancel the entire group booking, ma'am?" Marco asked, a hint of surprise in his professional tone. "That's correct," I said. "The charge was made to my card without my authorization. I did not approve this payment, and I will not be paying for it. I am the primary cardholder, and I am formally disputing the charge and requesting a full and immediate cancellation of all services associated with this reservation." I used clear, firm language I'd picked up from reading articles about financial disputes. I wanted to leave no room for ambiguity. I wasn't a disgruntled family member. I was a victim of an unauthorized transaction. More clicking. I see, ma'am. Our records show the card was on file from a previous booking. That may be, I interrupted, keeping my voice level, but a card on file does not constitute authorization for new charges, especially one of this magnitude. I was not part of the booking process, I did not speak to a travel agent, and I did not click Confirm Payment. I am therefore exercising my right as the cardholder to cancel it. Marco seemed to recognize the shift in tone. Of course, Ms. Reed, I understand. Let me just check the cancellation policy for this booking. He was quiet for a minute. I could hear him murmuring to a colleague in the background. My heart began to beat a little faster. What if there was a catch? What if it was non-refundable? Okay, Ms. Reed, he said, coming back on the line. It looks like you're in luck. The booking was made with our premium peace of mind insurance package. I almost laughed out loud. The irony was poetic. Aunt Brenda, in her cheapness, must have been upsold on a premium insurance package, likely thinking it was just a standard part of the booking. That insurance was about to give me peace of mind. This package allows for a full cash refund for cancellations made more than 72 hours before departure. Since the ship departs on Friday, you are well within that window. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. Excellent, I said. Then I'd like to proceed with the cancellation and the full refund to my card, please. Right away, ma'am. Can you please verify the full name and billing address associated with the card for security purposes? I gave him the information. He clacked away on his keyboard for another moment. All right, Ms. Reed. I have processed the cancellation for the Miller party, reservation number 77, B4 Tango. A full refund in the amount of $21,450.78 will be credited back to your Visa card ending in 1867. You should see it reflected in your account within 3 to 5 business days. You will also receive an email confirmation of this cancellation within the hour. Thank you, Marco, I said, a genuine warmth in my voice. You've been very helpful. You're welcome, Ms. Reed. Is there anything else I can assist you with today? No, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. That was everything. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. It was done. In one 10-minute phone call, I had undone their entire scheme. There would be no cruise, no Bahamas, no fun in the sun on my dime. There would only be a group of 15 people, standing at a port, being told their tickets were worthless. I imagined the moment of discovery. Aunt Brenda, striding up to the check-in counter with an air of self-importance, handing over her confirmation number only to be met with a confused look. The slow-dawning horror on her face as the agent explained the reservation had been canceled. The confusion turning to panic as she realized her plan had spectacularly backfired. The cascading effect as she had to deliver the news to the rest of the waiting family, including the friends they had magnanimously invited along. The humiliation would be absolute. I felt a surge of something powerful and clean. It wasn't glee, not exactly. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted. It was the feeling of justice. For years, I had absorbed their casual disrespect, their entitlement, their emotional and financial manipulations. I had allowed them to make me feel small, but in that moment, I had taken my power back. The confirmation email arrived 20 minutes later, a neat, tidy summary of my victory. Your cancellation has been confirmed. I saved it to a special folder in my inbox. I labeled it, Step 1. Because I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was only the beginning. The fallout was coming, and I needed to be ready for the next step. Friday arrived with a sense of quiet anticipation. It was D-Day, or more accurately, Departure Day. I knew their flight to the port city was an early one. I pictured them at the airport, giddy with excitement, taking selfies with captions like Vacation Mode, ON. The thought was almost amusing now, colored by the knowledge of what was waiting for them at the end of their journey. I went to work as usual. I felt a strange duality, living in two worlds at once. In one, I was Alice, the diligent software engineer, attending a morning stand-up meeting and mapping out my tasks for the day. In the other, I was a silent puppet master, watching the invisible strings I had cut begin to affect the players. Around noon, just as I was heading out to grab lunch, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. "This is so weird. We're at the cruise terminal, and there's a problem with our tickets. Aunt Brenda is yelling at the lady at the counter." I smiled to myself. Showtime. I typed back a neutral response. "Oh no, what kind of problem?" I didn't have to wait long for the follow-up. "They're saying the whole booking was canceled 2 days ago. Full refund issued. Brenda is turning purple. She keeps saying it's impossible." I could almost hear the shrill, indignant tones of my aunt's voice. The public scene she must be making. The embarrassment radiating through the rest of the family as they stood by, luggage in hand, with nowhere to go. I replied, "Canceled? By who? That's crazy." I was enjoying this far more than I probably should have. It was like watching the final act of a play where the villains finally get their comeuppance. Chloe's next text came a few minutes later, the digital equivalent of a panicked whisper. "Brenda just looked at her phone, and I think she's going to be sick. She said the travel agent sent her an email. The cardholder canceled it. Alice, was that you?" I didn't answer. I let the question hang in the air, a silent confirmation. I bought a sandwich from the deli across the street and sat on a park bench, enjoying the sunshine. The food had never tasted so good. The real storm began around 2:00 p.m. That was when the ship, the magnificent Bahama Bliss, was scheduled to set sail. I imagined the loud horn blast echoing across the water, the sounds of the party starting on the Lido deck. A party my family was decidedly not attending. My phone began to vibrate incessantly. A cascade of notifications. Missed call from Aunt Brenda. Missed call from Uncle Gary. A furious text from another cousin. "What did you do?" A pleading one from my mother. "Alice, please call me. Everyone is stranded." I ignored them all. I had nothing to say to them yet. My silence was my power. They had used silence to exclude me, and now I was using it to make them confront the consequences of their actions. They were stewing in a mess of their own making, stuck in a city far from home with 15 angry and disappointed people, canceled hotel rooms, likely bundled with the cruise, and a huge logistical nightmare to solve. I finished my workday, drove home, and made myself a cup of tea. As I sat on my couch, the phone rang again. This time it was Uncle Gary. I had a feeling he would be the one to break first. He wasn't a planner or a schemer like Brenda. He was a reactor, all bluster and rage. I let it ring 4 times, then I answered, putting the phone on speaker and setting it on the coffee table in front of me. "Hello," he roared, his voice distorted with fury. There was no greeting, no preamble. "Hello, Uncle Gary," I said calmly. "Don't you, hello, Uncle Gary, Emmy. What did you do, Alice? What in the world did you do?" "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, taking a sip of my tea. My heart was hammering, but my voice was a mask of placid confusion. "You know exactly what I mean?" he bellowed. I could hear the cacophony of an airport or a bus station in the background, angry voices, announcements. "Our cruise, our vacation, it's canceled. They said the cardholder canceled it. Brenda is a wreck, the kids are crying, you ruined everything." I ruined everything. The audacity was still staggering. "Oh, the cruise," I said, as if just remembering. "The one I wasn't invited on." There was a brief, sputtering silence on his end. He had clearly expected me to be apologetic, to be scared of his anger. My calm question threw him off script. That has nothing to do with it," he stammered, trying to regain his momentum. "Your Aunt Brenda thought you were busy. She was trying to be considerate." "Considerate," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Was it also considerate to charge over $21,000 to my credit card without my permission? This time the silence was longer. He had no defense for that, and he knew it. The background noise seemed to swell to fill the void. "We were going to pay you back," he finally said, his voice weaker, less confident. "Were you?" I asked. "Were you going to pay me back for the minivan, Gary? Or for the 4 years of cruises before this one? Or the dozen other times you borrowed money?" My records show a pretty consistent one-way flow of cash in this family, and it isn't flowing towards me. He was completely flustered now. This is unbelievable. After everything we've done for you, we are your family." This was the core of their belief system, that their status as family entitled them to a lifetime subscription to my bank account, that I owed them something simply for being related to them. "Family doesn't steal from each other, Gary," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. "Family doesn't exclude someone and then send them the bill. You wanted a vacation without me. Now you have a vacation without me. It just doesn't happen to be in the Bahamas." He started yelling again, a string of incoherent accusations and insults. He called me selfish, ungrateful, spiteful. He said I had always been jealous of Brenda. It was a desperate, pathetic attempt to regain control, to wound me, to make me the bad guy in his collapsed narrative. I listened patiently, letting him exhaust himself. When he finally paused to take a breath, I delivered the final blow. I used the same weapon they had used against me, their own words. "Well," I said, my voice light and dismissive, just like Brenda's text message, "I just figured you'd be too busy with the ocean anyway." And with that, I hung up. I immediately blocked his number. Then I blocked Brenda S., then the cousin who had texted me. I went through my contact list and preemptively blocked anyone I thought might be a flying monkey for my aunt and uncle. My mother's number came up. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the block button. I felt a pang of sadness. But she had been silent when they excluded me, and she was silent now, letting her brother-in-law scream at me. Her silence was a choice. I blocked her too. The silence that filled my apartment now was different. It wasn't the heavy, anxious silence of the past week. It was a clean, peaceful silence. It was the sound of freedom, the sound of a door closing on a toxic chapter of my life. The screaming was over. The fallout had landed squarely where it belonged, and I knew, with absolute clarity, what I needed to do next. The days flowy. The cruise fiasco were a strange mix of turmoil and tranquility. My phone, once a source of anxiety, was now blissfully quiet. By blocking the key players, I had created a protective bubble around myself. I knew a war was likely raging within the family, accusations flying, sides being chosen, but it was happening outside my walls. I refused to be drawn into it. The full refund appeared in my credit card account on Tuesday, a beautiful, positive balance of $21,450.78. Seeing the number, I felt a giddy sense of possibility. For years, sums like this had vanished from my account to fund someone else's life, someone else's happiness. It was crisis money, used to patch up the holes in their finances. This was the first time a sum this large felt like it was truly mine. Not to save, not to invest, but to use for something joyful. That's when the idea for Step 2 began to form. Step 1 was about stopping them. It was a defensive move, an act of self-preservation. Step 2 had to be about me. It had to be an offensive move, an act of self-celebration. I had to show them, and more importantly myself, what happened when I invested in my own happiness. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but I was about to serve it from a 5-star hotel with a breathtaking view. I spent the next 2 evenings engrossed in research. I had always dreamed of going to Japan. The serene temples of Kyoto, the electric energy of Tokyo, the majestic beauty of Mount Fuji, it was a world away from my family's loud, drama-filled cruises to the same handful of Caribbean ports. It was a trip for a single traveler, a trip for introspection and beauty, a trip that was unapologetically, entirely for me. I didn't skimp. I booked a first-class, round-trip ticket. I reserved rooms in some of the most beautiful hotels I could find. I scheduled a guided tour through the Arashiyama Bamboo Grove, a spot at a world-renowned sushi restaurant, and a ticket for the Shinkansen bullet train. The total cost was significant, but it was less than the amount they had tried to take from me. The feeling of clicking, confirm booking, on this trip was 1,000 times more satisfying than the call to the cruise line had been. This wasn't about canceling something. This was about creating something. A week later, Chloe called me from a number I didn't recognize. "Alice, it's me, Chloe. I'm calling from my friend's phone. I think my mom blocked your number on my phone." I felt a surge of affection for my young cousin. "Hey, Chloe, I'm glad you called. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, her voice heavy. "It's been a nightmare. Uncle Gary and Aunt Brenda are telling everyone you've gone crazy. They're trying to make you out to be the villain." "I figured they would," I said calmly. "But it's not working on everyone," she continued. "My dad is furious with them. He said what they did was stealing, plain and simple. Grandma is apparently refusing to speak to Brenda. It's a huge mess. But Alice, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I feel awful that I was going to go on that trip. I knew it was wrong that you weren't there, and I should have said something more." Her apology was genuine, and it meant the world to me. She was the only one who had reached out not to blame me, but to understand. She was the only one who saw my side. "It's not your fault, Chloe," I told her sincerely. "You were put in an impossible position. I really appreciate you calling me." We talked for a while longer, and she told me about her first year of college, her passion for her art classes, and her dreams of visiting the great museums of the world. An idea sparked in my mind. "Chloe," I said, "your 20th birthday is coming up in a few months, right?" "Yeah, in May." "How would you like to celebrate it in New York City? Just you and me. We could go to the Met, see a Broadway show, my treat." She was silent for a moment, and I could hear her choke up a little. "Really, Alice, you don't have to do that." "I want to," I said firmly. "This whole mess has taught me something important. It's taught me who my real family is. It's taught me to invest my time and my money in people who value me as a person, not just as a wallet. And you, Chloe, are one of those people." My trip to Japan was 2 weeks of pure magic. I woke up every morning with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I wandered through ancient temples, the scent of incense in the air. I got lost in bustling markets, the vibrant colors and sounds a feast for the senses. I sat in a perfectly manicured garden, sipping matcha and watching koi swim in a placid pond. For the first time, my mind wasn't occupied with other people's problems. I wasn't worrying about who needed what or how to keep the peace. I was just there, present, happy. On my last day, from my hotel room with a stunning view of the Tokyo skyline, I made my final move. I scrolled through the hundreds of photos I had taken and selected just one. It was a picture of M.E. standing on a scenic overlook with the iconic peak of Mount Fuji in the background. I looked happy, relaxed, and genuinely at peace. I wasn't smiling for a camera to please someone else. It was a real, unforced smile. I posted it on my social media, my first post in months. My profile was private, but I knew I had enough family members as friends that it would get back to everyone who needed to see it. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't write a long, passive-aggressive caption. I just wrote 5 simple words. Finally taking some time for myself. I added one more sentence, the cherry on top. "Japan is even more beautiful than I imagined. Thank you, Royal Atlantic Cruise Lines, for the travel credit. It was so worth it." Then I put my phone on airplane mode. I had made my statement. Step 2 was complete. The money they had tried to steal from me hadn't been lost. It had been transformed. It had been converted from a symbol of their entitlement into a symbol of my freedom. They had wanted to go to the Bahamas on my dime. Instead, I had gone to Japan on theirs. And the new boundary was now drawn, not in sand, but in solid rock. My generosity was no longer a right to be claimed, but a privilege to be earned. The flight home from Japan felt like a journey between 2 different lives. The Alice who had boarded the plane to Tokyo 2 weeks earlier was a woman still raw from a deep betrayal, her actions fueled by a cold, necessary anger. The Alice who was returning was different. The anger had faded, replaced by a profound and settled sense of peace. The rage had been the fuel to get the rocket off the ground, but the peace was the feeling of floating, weightless, in a new orbit. My apartment, once a silent testament to my isolation, now felt like a sanctuary. It was a space that was truly mine, free from the clinging demands and unspoken expectations of others. In the days that followed, the final ripples of my actions reached me, mostly through Chloe, who had become my unofficial family correspondent. Aunt Brenda and Uncle Gary were, by all accounts, social pariahs. My post had been the talk of the family. The explicit mention of the travel credit from the cruise line had removed any ambiguity about what had happened. There was no way for them to spin the story anymore. They had been caught, red-handed, not only in a lie but in a theft, and my serene photo against the backdrop of Mount Fuji was the ultimate, irrefutable proof of their failure. They had tried to hurt me, and in the end, they had only succeeded in funding the best vacation of my life. The humiliation was complete. My parents eventually reached out. My dad left a rambling, apologetic voicemail. My mother sent a long, tearful email. They were sorry, they said. They had gotten swept up in Brenda's plans, and it was easier to go along than to cause a scene. They admitted they had taken my generosity for granted. They asked for my forgiveness. I listened to the voicemail and read the email, and I didn't feel anger. I just felt a quiet sadness for them, and for the years I had spent trying to earn their pride. I wrote back a short, simple email. I told them I needed space, that I was happy they understood my position, but that our relationship would need to be different going forward. The days of me being the family ATM were over, and if they wanted a relationship with me, it would have to be with me, Alice the person, not Alice the provider. The greatest joy, however, came a few months later, on a bright weekend in May. I flew Chloe to New York City for her 20th birthday. Watching her face as she saw Times Square for the first time, her eyes wide with wonder, was a gift. We spent a whole day at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, her art student heart soaring as she stood before paintings by Van Gogh and Monet. We ate pizza in Greenwich Village, saw a spectacular show on Broadway, and took the ferry to see the Statue of Liberty up close. On our last evening, as we sat in a cafe overlooking Central Park, she looked at me, her eyes shining. "This is the best weekend of my life, Alice," she said. "Thank you." "You're welcome, Chloe," I said, smiling. "This is what family is supposed to feel like." It was the truth. It wasn't about grand, expensive gestures to buy affection from a crowd. It was about shared moments of genuine connection. It wasn't about keeping the peace at any cost. It was about investing in the people who brought peace to your life. The $21,000 from the cruise had been a painful lesson, but it had bought me something invaluable: a compass. It had pointed me away from the toxic, transactional relationships of my past and toward a future where my worth was not determined by my bank balance. I still have a family. It's smaller now and quieter. It's built on respect and genuine affection, not on obligation and entitlement. The relationship with my parents is slowly healing, rebuilt on new, healthier ground. ND, the one with my aunt and uncle is gone, and I feel no loss. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away. You have to be willing to cancel the cruise, to let the ship sail without you, so you can find your own, more beautiful destination. From my new vantage point, the view was clear, the air was fresh, and for the first time I felt truly, completely free. To the audience, have you ever been in a situation where your kindness was mistaken for weakness? It's a painful realization when you discover that the people you've gone above and beyond for don't see your generosity as a gift, but as an obligation. Alice's story is a powerful reminder that setting boundaries is not selfish. It's an act of self-preservation. She had to become the villain in her family's story to become the hero of her own. What would you have done in her position? Would you have canceled the cruise? And what would your step 2 have been? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes, the most difficult decisions lead to the most profound freedom.